opening with dramatic, cinematic music and sweeping visuals of the desert, focusing on the still waters of the Suez Canal. October 6, 1973. On the holiest day of the Jewish calendar, Yom Kippur, and during the Muslim holy month of Ramadan, the sands of the Sinai Desert, once silent, were about to roar. This was the day that would forever be etched in history as the start of the October War, a conflict that would reshape the Middle East and send shockwaves across the globe.
Ho, ho, ho!
To understand why this war was inevitable, we must go back 6 years. In 1967, the Six-Day War ended with Israel occupying Egypt's Sinai Peninsula and Syria's Golan Heights. For years, the situation was a festering wound, a stalemate of no war, no peace. Along the Suez Canal, Israel had constructed what many believed to be an impregnable defensive fortress, the Bar-Lev Line. It was a massive wall of sand, fortified with concrete bunkers, minefields, and pipes designed to pump flammable liquid into the canal itself.
Ho, ho, ho!
To the world it seemed that crossing it was an impossible feat. But in Cairo and Damascus, a different plan was taking shape, one born from a deep sense of national duty to reclaim what was lost. Transition to animated maps showing military positions. In the early hours of October 6th, the Egyptian and Syrian armies were poised for a coordinated, surprise assault. On the western bank of the Suez Canal, Egypt had amassed its second and third armies.
Ho, ho, ho!
Their objective, to cross the canal, breach the Bar-Lev Line, and establish a foothold deep within the Sinai, simultaneously hundreds of miles to the northeast. Syrian forces prepared to storm the Golan Heights, aiming to push back Israeli troops from the strategic plateau. The element of surprise was their greatest weapon. Israeli intelligence, widely considered the best in the world, had tragically miscalculated.
Ho, ho, ho!
They believed the Arab states were not ready, not willing, and not capable of launching a full-scale war. They were about to be proven wrong. At precisely 2:05 p.m., the silence was shattered. Over 200 Egyptian fighter jets streaked across the sky, striking Israeli command centers, airfields, and communication hubs deep inside the Sinai. At the same time, a thunderous artillery barrage from over 2,000 cannons rained down on the Bar-Lev Line, creating a curtain of fire and smoke.
Ho, ho, ho!
It was the signal. Under this protective cover, the first wave of 8,000 Egyptian soldiers boarded their assault boats and began to paddle across the Suez Canal. Their voices rose in a powerful chant, Allahu Akbar. God is great. It was a cry of faith, courage, and determination. Show historical footage and AI animations of soldiers crossing the canal. As the first soldiers reached the eastern bank, they faced the towering sand ramparts of the Bar-Lev Line, some reaching as high as a 6-story building.
Ho, ho, ho!
Conventional military wisdom suggested it would take days of heavy bombing to breach it. But the Egyptians had a brilliantly simple and effective solution, conceived by a young officer. They unleashed high-powered water cannons, the kind typically used in mining, and began blasting away at the sand wall. The seemingly invincible barrier began to crumble, melting away into mud. Within hours, they had carved dozens of passages, allowing tanks, armored vehicles, and thousands more troops to pour into the Sinai.
Ho, ho, ho!
The world watched in disbelief as the Egyptian flag was raised proudly on the eastern bank of the canal. The myth of the invincible Bar-Lev Line had been shattered. The initial success was breathtaking. Egyptian forces, equipped with sophisticated Soviet anti-tank and anti-aircraft missiles, inflicted heavy losses on the initial Israeli counterattacks. For the first time in decades, the tactical advantage seemed to have shifted.
Ho, ho, ho!
In the north, Syrian forces also made significant early gains, surging into the Golan Heights and pushing Israeli defenders to the brink. The two-front war was a strategic nightmare for Israel, forcing them to fight desperately for survival. Introduce quotes from leaders. The war was a testament to the spirit and planning of leaders like Egyptian President Anwar Sadat. He had spent years meticulously rebuilding his army and engaging in clever diplomatic deception to lull the world into a false sense of security.
Ho, ho, ho!
In a speech to his people, he declared, "We have fought for the sake of peace, the peace that is based on justice." For him, this was not a war of aggression, but a war to break the stalemate and force a political solution that diplomacy alone had failed to achieve. The bravery of the individual soldier on the ground was monumental. They were fighting for their land, their dignity, and the pride of their nation.
Ho, ho, ho!
Their courage in the face of overwhelming odds turned the tide of the conflict in its crucial opening days. However, the war was far from over. After the initial shock, Israel mobilized its reserves and, with a massive airlift of military supplies from the United States, began to launch a powerful counteroffensive. The fighting intensified, becoming one of the largest tank battles in history since World War II. On the Syrian front, Israeli forces managed to push the Syrian army back and advance toward Damascus.
Ho, ho, ho!
On the Egyptian front, a daring Israeli operation led by General Ariel Sharon found a gap between the Egyptian Second and Third Armies. They crossed to the western side of the canal, encircling Egypt's Third Army and threatening major cities. The conflict had now drawn in the superpowers. The United States and the Soviet Union, backing opposite sides, were on high alert. For a tense few days, the world held its breath, fearing the conflict could escalate into a global confrontation.
Ho, ho, ho!
This immense international pressure, combined with the brutal realities on the battlefield, pushed all sides toward a ceasefire. On October 25th, the guns finally fell silent. The war was over, but its impact was just beginning. Transition to emotional music and images of victory celebrations and soldiers returning home. Though the military outcome was complex, the October War was a profound strategic and political victory for Egypt and the Arab world.
Ho, ho, ho!
It shattered the perception of Israeli invincibility and restored a sense of pride and confidence that had been lost in 1967. The soldiers who returned home were greeted as heroes. Their sacrifice had proven that the status quo was unsustainable. The war fundamentally altered global politics. It triggered the 1973 oil crisis, when Arab nations imposed an embargo, demonstrating the powerful economic leverage they held.
Ho, ho, ho!
More importantly, it paved the way for peace. The conflict forced a reluctant world to re-engage with the search for a solution. It led directly to the Camp David Accords of 1978, where President Sadat and Israeli Prime Minister Menahem Begin, two former enemies, took the courageous steps toward peace. This historic agreement resulted in Egypt reclaiming the entire Sinai Peninsula and the signing of a peace treaty that has held to this day.
Ho, ho, ho!
The October War of 1973 remains a powerful story of strategy, sacrifice, and the unbreakable will of a nation to reclaim its rights. It teaches us that even in the face of impossible odds, courage and unity can change history. It is a testament to the soldiers who fought with valor and the leaders who dared to imagine a future where war could ultimately lead to peace. Their legacy is not just one of military achievement, but a lasting reminder that the pursuit of justice and dignity is a cause worth fighting for.
Ho, ho, ho!
Thank you so much for watching. If you found this journey into history meaningful, please consider liking this video, and subscribing to our channel for more stories that shaped our world. We'll see you next time.
Ho, ho, ho!